Okay, guys, welcome today, and we are here, and this is Halloween, so trick or treat, you guys. If you guys are out trick or treating and you're here watching this, welcome. This is Alan J. Palmer, also known as Bab. I am the musician, composer, and founder of the United Institute of Music Science and the creator of Systems for Improvisation and the United Music Science Wheel, Music Metaphysics. You know, I coined that term, Music Metaphysics. And you're in this free course, and there's a lot there, so don't worry, take your time, go through the the modules and the replays and the notes that are there for you, provided for you, and take your time as you learn this whole new way. But as you notice, as you go through it, we're not going to change anything. We don't change, and it just takes a little time to understand the concept. Okay, so we're gonna go through a review for new students and for some of our students. Some of our advanced students or students that's been with us, intermediate students. It's great to review. I review because what we're reviewing is the systems for improvisation. Okay, so as a musician, we practice. So we're gonna have a review tonight on the systems for improvisation. And then we're going to connect it to music metaphysics, okay, which is going to be real cool. Now, tomorrow night, we're going to dig real deep. We're going to take a real deep dive into the United Music Science Wheel, which is my invention, which I'm very proud of, which is going to connect metaphysics and music theory and so many other things. It's an amazing tool, okay? So we're going to go over some of this, and all of this is going to overlap. So just pay attention, and you've heard these things before. We're going to go over the chromatic. When we talk about the systems for improvisation, in traditional music theory, they look at it as scales. They would say like your scales, like they call the chromatic scale. And it is, you could say it's a scale, but scale has a weight, or it has a beginning and an ending, like C major, B flat, all your 12, what they call your 12 major and minor scales, right? So those are real scales. Well, you could say those are scales because you start on A and you're going to end on A, and those tones, how they're related. But when we talk about the symmetrical scales, okay, the symmetrical scales are like the laws or the systems for improvisation, okay? So this is going to be exciting, even if you're an advanced musician, advanced improviser, maybe you didn't look at it this way, and I'm sure you didn't connect this to music metaphysics, because we're the only school that is teaching the United Music Science Wheel, which I invented, okay? So you guys are going to check this out firsthand, okay? But before we get into all the heavy stuff, tomorrow we're going to go into your key signature, our cosmic chord. We're going to connect it to traditional Chinese metaphysics, which is Baza, which is going to open up a whole universe, really, of study for us, okay? So, but tonight we're gonna start with the systems for improvisation, okay? Now, if you're in the course, you'll see that we meet every Monday. So Mondays, and so there's a Zoom link. So after this, we're gonna take a break, and you guys can meet us on Zoom, and we have an ABA section, which means you can ask BAP anything, ask me anything about anything at all, because we're a community, you guys. We're a community. So I want to welcome you if you're new, and if you're one of our students. This is going to be fun tonight. So let's go right to it, and let's get into what systems for improvisation is. Now, this is you'll find this inside, inside your Teachable, inside your inbox. All these downloads are there for you, okay? Okay, so let's get right into this, into what this is about. Okay, so systems for improvisation, right? So what is a system, right? So let's start at the beginning. So we're gonna deal with the music of the spirit, music of the spirit, because this piano does nothing until I touch it and put my concepts in it and put my spirit. And same thing with the saxophone or the trumpet or the violin, or even your voice, right, which is like the first instrument, right? So let's get right into this. So we're gonna deal with it as a system. So a system, I grabbed some definitions. So a system is a set of connected parts or things that compose a complex whole, right? Okay, a set of principles also, right? An organized scheme or method, right? A method, a methodology, a technique, a process, an approach can be a system, and a practice, right? So we're going to talk about the system of improvisation, right? They say, oh, improvisation is a mysterious thing. Is there a system? Are there systems that we can use to open up our improvisation, right? Yes, there is, right? So we're going to go through these, right? And it's dealing with these first 6 skills that we talk about so much. So let's get into this. When we talk about when we're talking about improvisation, right? Improvisation is an act. Like, that's what we're doing. We're improvising. You're improvising every day, really. Life is improvisation. When we talk about music improvisation, they like to say that that's the main ingredient in jazz, and it is. It is improvisation. That's why it's your spirit, because it's a music where it's never the same, and it's a lot of improvisation there. All right, collective and individual. Okay, so something that is improvised, like especially a piece of music, is created without preparation. Now that's kind of a I disagree with that. Your preparation is your life, is your study, your practice. That's how you're going to prepare. And when you're improvising, all of those tools that you practice are accessible to you, right? Okay, so it sounds like magic, right? But it's a lot of practice, a lot of preparation that goes into it, right? So we're gonna break it down, right? So now when they talk about jazz, this is a terrible definition I just grabbed off. I can't believe this is still on Google, man. But it's the definition of jazz, and everything in here is wrong, but mostly wrong. But this is a more correct definition, right? Because it's a music of the spirit. And you could say, yes, it was created. It was the music of the spirit created by the African Americans with origins dating back to the beginnings of time and all humanity, right? It's characterized by polyrhythms. Polyrhythms is more than one rhythm going on at one time. Syncopation, that's like jagged rhythms or on the upbeat. Polyphony, many melodies or counterpoint, like you would say, or many harmonies. And antiphony, which is call and response. Call and response, okay? Freedom of expression, improvisation, and collective spontaneous creation, right? Okay, so it's a oneness, and it's a beautiful flow, right? It happens in the spur of the moment, right? So there's no two performances are going to be the same. So of course there's a lot of practice in this, right? So we're going to go over these systems for improvisation. We're going to start with the chromatic system, right? Which we like to they call it a scale, but we, you look at the word chromos, it comes from all the colors. It means everything. It's going to mean everything. So we're going to call it the creator scale, right? Because all the other scales are going to come from your chromatic scale. All of them. All of them come from the chromatic scale. Okay? So when we look at the your chromatic scale is all the 12 notes. And it has no beginning or end. How could you say there's a G chromatic scale? You could start on G, but G doesn't own the chromatic scale. Because it's equal half steps. It's composed of half steps, you see. Now, of course, it's 12 notes because it's going to start repeating. But it has no beginning or ending. Right? It's the creator scale, right? So everything comes, all your creation is going to come from that. Now, we're going to talk about how we're going to use this in an actual system, right, for improvisation, okay? We're going to talk about that. Now, just to give you a heads up real quick, just chromatic, you move everything you know. So say, I only know 3 notes. I only know 3 notes, that's all I know. G, B flat, and C. Well, you can make music with those 3 notes, and you can actually take those 3 notes through a chromatic system and expand your improvisation. Let me show you how. So you got to take those 3 notes, and you can take them through your chromatic system till you get all 12 places to play that. Okay, so that's how we use it in the system, all right? That's one way, okay? Because it's moving everything in half steps. And, every time you hit, right, say, I only know those 3 notes. Well, take those 3 notes up a half step or down a half step. Take it down a half step. Now, you got to get familiar with that neighborhood, right? Okay, so it can be many neighborhoods, but that's a start of the chromatic system, okay? And you can practice like that, okay? Now, when we talk about the 2 whole tones, now that chromatic scale is going to break up into 2 whole tone scales. When they say, what's a whole tone scale? Well, it's built of whole steps. Chromatic scale is half steps. And the whole tone scale is all whole steps. So the whole tone scale, there's only 2 of those, right? So it's whole steps. It only has 6 notes each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the other one, if I go up a half step, of course, that's it. Okay, that's it. That's it. Okay. The whole tone scale, okay? And they're like the opposite. You could say they're opposites notes in a way, but they're really a whole half step apart or perfect 4th or perfect 5th apart. Okay, all right. Now we use those, in a lot of different ways. Now we're going to talk about that. So we got 1 chromatic, 1 creator, 2 opposites, and by the way, we like to use the analogy of Adam and Eve. Now you don't have to. You can use DNA. If you're more on the scientific side, right? So you say, okay, DNA, I'm going to start on D, and I build 1 whole tone scale. And I start on the note A, and that's going to build the other whole tone scale. Now, like I said, they have no beginning or ending, so we can use Adam and Eve, start on A, and we can start on E, which is a 4th and 5th apart. See, they're 4th and 5th apart. D and A, or A and E. You see? And that's all you need to know. All you need to know is there's 2 of them, right? And we're going to get into how to use those. So many uses those in a system. So many uses for your whole tone scales, okay, for your improvisation. Okay? These are the systems for improvisation. Okay, all right. Now the next thing is that those 2 whole tone scales, we like to say Adam and Eve had a baby. So we take A and E and B, and we can build what they call the diminished. We like to call the Trinity of Diminish. And this is probably, most of us musicians, this is our favorite topic, I mean, it's one of my favorite topics, the Trinity of Diminish, and we're gonna explain that, for you new cats. And if you know there's only 3 diminished scales in all of music, just like there's only 2 whole tone scales, only 1 chromatic. Now they're not scales now, you guys. Now they're systems. So we're gonna use them as actual systems. We have to understand what do they do, what can they do, and how they're formed, and how we can use them for our improvisation, right? So we only got 3 diminished scales, and they're built by half step, whole step, half step, half step, whole step, half step. You see? And so it's half step and then a whole step, and then you got to follow it with a half step, whole step, then half step, whole step, alternating. Okay? So if you're going to go like say, I'll start anywhere. Now remember, these symmetrical scales don't have a beginning or ending. Okay? So I can start anywhere. So let me just start on C. Right? And I'm going to start with a whole step. So I'm going to go C to D. And then I'm going to follow that with a half step. E flat. And then I'm going to follow with another whole step. To F. And then you guessed it, I'm going to follow that with a half step, right? So F sharp or G flat, whatever you want to call it. Then I'm going to do another whole step. And I keep alternating half step, whole step, and then a half step. And that's where I started. But I can keep going. And I can keep going on and on because it's a symmetrical scale. Now that's 1, right? Now if I keep the same formula, right, and I start up a half step from that one, right? So say I'm going to start on D flat now. I'm going to start on D flat. And I'm going to go whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And it's going to give me the other one. Okay, and it gives me the other diminish. Okay, you got it? Okay, and that gives me the other one. And now the third one, if I go up another half step, which I can, right? I do the same formula. And it gives me the last, right? Okay, you got it? Okay, now, like I said, we start on A, and if I use the same formula, like whole step, and I start on E, and B, for baby, I'm sorry. And so those relate. So those relate to 4 tonalities, and we're going to get into that, okay, in a minute, okay? So those are, and we talk about the modes and scales, right? So when we talk about modes and scales, there's only 12 that we really have to memorize. There's only 12. So there's only 12 that we have to really memorize of these modes and scales and families. There's different points of view. Like for instance, C major. Well, C major is the exact same thing as A minor, what they call A minor natural minor. And it's the same thing as, which it's relative minor, right? A minor, right? And then you have F Lydian. If I start on F, and if I start on D, you can call that D minor. Now, without going into all the other modes like Phrygian, all the other ones, start right there. So you just understand there's a major and a relative minor, and a Lydian major, and a Dorian minor. Okay? And it's like Batman and Superman. It's like Clark Kent and Superman. They have aliases. You probably have aliases, right? Different modes, right? So that's how we work these scales. But those are like families, right? There's only 12. It's only 12. Now, when we talk about in systems for improvisation, we talk about also movement in music, movement in time, right? So there's so many different types of movement. There's so many different types of movement. But we want you guys to just understand one of the most basic ones in this free course is upper fourth down to fifth. Now let me show you. What I mean is like remember now we move everything chromatically, right? We can move things chromatically, right? Which will be like I'm going to take the C major chord and I'm going to move it chromatically. What you should do, by the way, right? But you can also go upper fourth down to fifth. And that's descending. And then I can go upper fifth down to fourth to ascend. Now these are exercises. I hope you guys are doing this stuff, because it's going to help you understand all the chords, movement in music, and you can use it as a systems for improvisation. Okay, you take all your chord qualities that way. Okay, so that's when we talk about these systems. All right, so I went over these, and you guys can use this for your review. All right, now I want to thank you guys for coming out. Now before we go into the we take a break and we go into the next section. This is the topic I'm sure you guys might have a lot of questions on, which is the Trinity of Diminish. Okay, now we talked about these three diminished scales, but how do they relate? How are they going to relate? Well, there are only three diminished scales of chords in all of music, right? Okay, so remember we talked about these 12 major or minor keys, whether you want to call it Lydian or mode or whatever. I don't care what you call it, but it's going to relate to one of these diminished scales, right? Okay, so it's going to have a relationship with more than one of these, with all of these diminished scales, but 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so we're going to go over this, and I hope that you guys are practicing this stuff, so you know that it's only an 8-note scale, right? And I explained it to you, how we build it. You can start with a half step first, and just wherever you start, you got to make sure that you follow that with the whole step. So if I start with the whole step first, I have to follow that with a half step, of course, right? Okay. Now, the reason why it's a special scale because it's going to relate to 4 minor relationships, 4 dominant relationships, and 4 resolutions, each one of these, okay? And that's going to cover pretty much a lot of the movement, a lot of the language in music, really, and it's going to demystify a lot of what you might hear in so-called jazz or the bebop language or the modern music. What's modern music today, all right? Composers, all right? Because you're a composer. All right, so let's get into this. So now you see, I'm going to show you in the following 9 diagrams, and we don't have to go through. We don't have time to go through all 9, but they're there in your notes, you guys. Okay, and we're going to utilize the half whole step formula. We're just going to use the half whole step formula for this. Okay, all right, and we're going to start on E, A, and B. Remember, Eve, Adam, and the baby, respectfully, and we can see these 4 minor relationships. All right, that are going to relate to B minor, A flat minor, F minor, D minor. The 4 dominant relationships are going to relate to B flat, G, E, and what they call D flat 7, and their resolutions. All right, to E flat, C major, A major, and G flat major. And these can be major or minor. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so now if you look at this diagram and you guys can start to practice this. First, you got to know the scale, right? So E minor, I'm just going to use this. It's E minor. The reason why it says E minor plus, because I'm going to use a half step first and then a whole step. So the plus represents the whole step. So that's the pattern, right? You got it? So half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. And like I said, I'm just using E as an example, but once you understand it, you're going to know it's going to have no beginning or ending. Now, the important thing is to understand these relationships, okay? So E minor, right? We're starting with the half step, right? It's going to have a direct relationship with F minor. It has a direct relation with F minor. It has a direct relationship with A flat minor. And F minor, remember? And D minor. And B minor. Okay, so it relates to those 4 different minor keys. Got it? Okay? Right, now just follow this, and you guys can practice this. Over time, you're going to be able to create, and it'll make sense to you. Now, of course, if it's going to relate to those 4 minors, that same diminished scale is going to relate to these 4 dominants. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure like, okay, which dominants are you talking about? Well, what do you think? You know, it's the dominants that are going to relate to those minors. So it's going to be, you know, like I said, it relates to F minor. So it's going to relate to B flat 7, that diminished pattern. It's going to relate to also D flat 7. It's going to relate to E7 and G7, right? Now, if you notice, each time I'm doing this, they're creating another diminished chord. If you peep it, okay? All right, if you don't, go to the piano and check it out, okay? So now, so it's going to relate to E7, that same diminished scale, right? So this diminished scale I don't want to resolve it yet. I just want to show you the diminished, right? So it goes to B minor. All right. Now, you know it's going to go to A, right? Okay. I'll have to pull out the next slide, but let's just go through this for those of you and everyone so that we can all understand this, okay? So like some songs have a diminished chord. I mean a dominant chord forever, right? So you can play that diminished scale, right? You're not going to start on E. You don't have to start on E. You can start on any note. Remember, because there's no beginning or ending. But remember, right? So it relates to E7. It's also going to relate to D flat 7. What they call a D flat 7 chord. Okay. It's going to relate to your B flat 7 chord and your G7 chord. And of course, let's go to the next slide. It's going to resolve to your C major. Right? Okay? It resolves to your C major, that diminished scale. And it's also going to resolve to your A major. And it's also going to resolve to your G flat major. And it resolves to your E flat major. Okay, so there you have it. There you have it, right? Now, if you go through all of these with the A, and you go through the same drill, and you go through the B, you've got them all covered. Okay, you got them all covered. But just to be sure, I put for you in the following 6 charts all of the formulas, every last one of them. So you just take one page and you shed. You practice until you don't need that page anymore. Until you don't need to look at this. You could improvise off that E whole half diminished scale, and you can relate it to those 4 dominants that we talked about. You can relate it to the resolutions where it's going to resolve. You dig? Okay? And then you go through all the polarities, and there it is written out. Now, the last thing, you guys, before we get into music metaphysics and we take our break, is I want you guys to just look at your hands. Now, we talk about the palm oracle. Palm oracle is another tool that I invented. You know, it's funny, you know, I'm Bad Alan Palmer. So this is the palm oracle, okay, you guys? Now, you know this is not middle C. I'm not giving you the middle C. I would not give you the middle finger. I'm giving you the middle C right now. And this is middle C right here in the middle, right? So these are your 3 diminished. You dig? There they are. 3 diminished, and these are your 12 tones. C, A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D flat, and you're back at C. Now you guys can practice this. You know, you can practice your diminished. You know, you can practice your diminished, your 3 diminished scales, right? So, right? And then the third one is just D, B, A flat, F. Okay? So this you are music, you guys. You are music. So it's just a matter of just understanding these systems for improvisation and understanding this. This is the Trinity of Diminish. Now, when we go into the whole tones, if I plot the whole tones on your hand, you know, you're going to see the same effect, right? And actually, you're going to see a DNA strand, okay? And but we'll get to that one later, okay? So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick workshop on the Trinity of Diminished and the systems for improvisation. Now, tomorrow we're going to take a deep dive into music metaphysics. Now, all of this is music metaphysics. Now you understand the tools and you understand the first systems for improvisation when we talk about the first 6 scales, okay? So 1 chromatic, right? 2 whole tones, and then you got the 3 diminished. And we went over the Trinity of Diminished tonight, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the whole tones. Now, if you have any questions, you can type it into the chat, and I'll see you guys at the ABA session. All right? Thank you very much. Happy music making.